The pristine white orchids adorning the church pews seemed to mock Ruth as she sat motionless in her custom-designed wedding dress, the minutes ticking by with excruciating slowness. Her carefully styled hair and meticulously applied makeup felt heavier with each passing moment. The whispers behind her grew from concerned murmurs to an unmistakable buzz of speculation. A church full of guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the rustle of fabric and squeaking of wooden pews filling the sacred space. The modified wheelchair beneath her, draped in silk to match her gown, remained steady even as her world began to tilt. Her hands, adorned with perfectly manicured nails and a sparkling engagement ring, trembled slightly as she checked her phone for the 100th time. The message that finally arrived made her heart stop. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." In that moment, surrounded by 500 witnesses to her humiliation, Ruth realized that the fairy tale she believed in was nothing more than an illusion. The clock struck noon, marking not the beginning of her happily ever after, but the start of something entirely unexpected. Ruth Mitchell had always seen the world through an artist's eyes, finding beauty in unexpected places. Born with spinal muscular atrophy, she learned early that life rarely followed a straight path. Her condition meant her muscles weakened progressively, but her spirit grew stronger with each challenge. From her wheelchair, she created vibrant worlds that danced across the pages of children's books, her illustrations bringing joy to countless young readers who never questioned whether their favorite artist could walk. Art had been her escape since childhood, when hospital stays became too frequent and lonely. During those long nights, she would sketch scenes from her favorite movies, particularly those starring Keanu Reeves. His character's resilience resonated with her own struggles, and his sister's battle with leukemia made her feel less alone in her medical journey. She covered her hospital room walls with drawings inspired by his films, creating her own universe where physical limitations didn't define someone's worth. At 32, Ruth had built a successful career as a children's book illustrator, working from her apartment in Boston. Her latest series, about a wheelchair-using detective, had won critical acclaim, though she still struggled with publishers who questioned whether children could relate to a disabled protagonist. Then James entered her life like a character from one of her stories. They met at a local art gallery where she was showcasing her work. James, a pharmaceutical sales representative, seemed different from others who often avoided eye contact or spoke to her caregiver instead of her. He asked intelligent questions about her techniques, laughed at her dry humor, and treated her wheelchair as naturally as if it were a bar stool at their favorite coffee shop. Their romance bloomed quickly, intense and all-consuming. James introduced her to his family, who welcomed her warmly, though she sometimes caught his mother's concerned glances when discussing future grandchildren. She dismissed the warning signs. How he tensed slightly when helping her transfer from her chair, his occasional frustration with the extra time needed for daily tasks, the way he changed subjects when she mentioned wedding accessibility requirements. The proposal came 6 months into their relationship on a rainy Tuesday evening in her apartment. James had ordered her favorite Thai food and arranged her art supplies into a heart shape on her drafting table. The ring was perfect, elegant but not so elaborate that it would interfere with her drawing. Ruth said yes through happy tears, believing she had finally found someone who saw past her disability to the woman beneath. Wedding planning consumed the next 4 months. Ruth threw herself into every detail, determined to create a ceremony that would accommodate her needs while maintaining the romance she had always dreamed of. She designed her own wedding dress, collaborating with a seamstress to ensure it would work with her wheelchair, while making her feel like a princess. The venue required careful consideration. Every inch had to be accessible without making accessibility the focal point. As the date approached, subtle changes emerged in James's behavior. He became distant during venue visits, disappeared for hours citing work emergencies, and grew quiet when she excitedly shared updates about the ceremony adaptations. Their final dinner together, just 2 nights before the wedding, should have been her warning. James barely touched his food, avoiding her eyes as she chatted about final arrangements. When she asked if everything was okay, he smiled too quickly and blamed work stress. Ruth had spent her life advocating for herself, fighting for independence and respect in a world that often tried to define her by what she couldn't do rather than what she could. Yet love had made her lower her guard, ignore the instincts that had protected her for so long. She wanted so desperately to believe in the fairy tale that she missed the signs of its unraveling, right up until that devastating moment at the altar when reality came crashing down through 5 simple words on a phone screen. The morning of her wedding dawned with perfect clarity, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows of the church's bridal suite. Ruth sat before the antique vanity as her sister Emily arranged the last white rose in her hair. The excitement in the room was palpable as bridesmaids fluttered around, adjusting their lavender dresses and sharing nervous laughter. Ruth studied her reflection, hardly recognizing the radiant bride looking back at her. The makeup artist had worked magic, highlighting her cheekbones and making her green eyes sparkle. Her dress, a masterpiece of ivory silk and delicate lace, draped perfectly over her wheelchair, the fabric flowing like water around the frame she had decorated with tiny crystal butterflies. The first hint of something amiss came when James didn't respond to her good morning text. Emily assured her he was probably just busy getting ready with his groomsmen. But Ruth felt an unfamiliar knot forming in her stomach. As the morning progressed, none of the groomsmen answered their phones either. The wedding coordinator's smile became increasingly strained as she made hushed calls from the corner of the room. By 11:30, the murmurs began. Guests were arriving, filling the church pews, but there was still no sign of the groom or his party. Ruth's father appeared in the doorway, his face ashen, phone clutched in his trembling hand. She knew before he spoke that everything was falling apart. The church fell silent as she wheeled down the aisle at noon, determination masking her growing fear. She had spent her whole life proving she could overcome any obstacle. Surely this was just another challenge to face head-on. The priest's sympathetic glance made her stomach churn, but she positioned herself where she and James had practiced during rehearsal, trying to ignore the empty space beside her. Minutes stretched into eternities. The flower arrangements she had carefully selected seemed to wilt under the weight of 500 stares. The string quartet played the same piece for the 3rd time. The notes hanging heavily in the air to Ruth's phone felt like ice in her hands, each second without a message from James chipping away at her carefully constructed composure. When the message finally came, the words blurred through her tears. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. The chair, the care you'll need. I thought I was stronger than this. You deserve better." The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering against her wheelchair's metal frame. The sound echoed through the church like a gunshot, shattering the tense silence. Emily rushed forward, but Ruth barely felt her sister's embrace. The sympathetic murmurs from the crowd transformed into a deafening roar in her ears. Someone suggested clearing the church. Others openly wept. Ruth remained motionless, her artist's hands gripping her armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white as her perfect day crumbled around her. Her father's voice cut through the chaos, strong despite its tremor, announcing that there would be no wedding today. The words made it real. Ruth felt her carefully constructed world of hope and love collapse, leaving behind only the harsh reality she had tried so hard to forget, that some people would never see past her wheelchair, never understand that her disability was just one part of who she was, not the whole story. As guests began to file out, their pitying glances feeling like physical blows, Ruth finally allowed herself to break. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. In that moment, surrounded by wilting flowers and whispered condolences, she had never felt more alone. The days following the wedding that wasn't blurred together in a haze of returned gifts and canceled reservations. The Ruth's apartment, once filled with wedding preparations and hope, now felt like a museum of broken dreams. Wedding presents sat unopened in the corner, their cheerful wrapping paper a cruel reminder of celebrations that would never happen. The dress hung like a ghost in her closet. She couldn't bear to look at it, but couldn't bring herself to put it away either. Emily had moved in temporarily, sleeping on the couch, and managing the practical aspects of dismantling a wedding. She fielded calls from concerned relatives, handled vendor cancellations, and quietly removed photos of James from the walls when she thought Ruth wasn't looking. But Ruth noticed everything, her artist's eye catching each empty space, each gap where happiness used to live. Social media became a minefield. Despite Emily's efforts to keep the story private, someone had posted about the incident. The post went viral, drawing thousands of comments ranging from sympathy to outrage. Local news stations reached out for interviews, which Ruth declined through her newly hired publicist. Another unexpected aftermath of being left at the altar in the age of social media. Ruth withdrew from her work, missing deadlines for the first time in her career. The children's book characters she usually brought to life remained flat and lifeless on her drawing tablet. Her agent called daily, voice growing increasingly concerned as projects fell behind schedule. But Ruth couldn't find the magic anymore. Every time she tried to draw, she remembered sketching wedding details in the margins of her storyboards, planning her future in the white spaces of other people's stories. The viral post caught the attention of disability advocates who wanted to use her story to highlight discrimination. Reporters wrote think pieces about ableism in relationships that Ruth's inbox filled with messages from other disabled individuals sharing similar experiences of rejection and heartbreak. The attention felt suffocating. Her private pain had become public property, dissected and discussed by strangers who thought they understood. James sent one more message, a week after the wedding, a long email full of apologies and explanations, talking about his fears of being a caregiver, his worries about their future, his shame at his own weakness. Ruth read it once, then asked Emily to block his email address. His words meant nothing now. They were just another reminder that he had seen her disability before he saw her. Nights were the hardest. Ruth would lie awake, remembering the moment she first noticed James's hesitation when discussing their future. She recalled the subtle signs she had ignored, the way his smile tightened when she talked about adapting their future home, his growing silence during wedding preparations. She had been so desperate to believe in love that she had betrayed her own instincts. But amid the darkness, tiny sparks of light began to appear. A young fan sent a letter about how Ruth's wheelchair-using detective had helped her feel seen. A local art gallery offered to host an exhibition of her work, focusing on themes of resilience and transformation. Her sister's unwavering presence reminded her that some loves, family, friendship, self-love, were stronger than romantic disappointment. One morning, exactly 2 weeks after the wedding day, Ruth wheeled herself to her drafting table. Her hands shook as she picked up her stylus, but she forced herself to begin sketching. The lines were shaky at first, then grew stronger. On the screen, a figure began to emerge, a woman in a wheelchair, surrounded by broken pieces of a life she thought she wanted, but her hands were not trying to reassemble the past. Instead, they were creating something entirely new from the fragments. Keanu Reeves scrolled through his phone in the quiet of his hotel room, taking a rare moment of solitude between filming scenes. His attention caught on a news article about a wedding gone wrong. Normally, he scrolled past such stories, but something in the headline made him pause. Children's book illustrator left at altar over disability. The article included a photo of Ruth in her wedding dress, her artistic talent evident in the way she had transformed her wheelchair into something magical with crystal butterflies catching the light. The image stirred memories of his sister Kim's battle with leukemia, the countless hospital rooms they had brightened with drawings and dreams. He remembered how people's attitudes toward Kim had changed during her illness, how some had pulled away, unable to handle the reality of her condition. Reading deeper into the article, Keanu found himself drawn to Ruth's story. The reporter had included samples of her artwork, vibrant illustrations that seemed to leap off the screen, featuring characters who happened to use wheelchairs, but whose stories focus on adventure and discovery rather than disability. One particular series about a wheelchair-using detective solving mysteries in a fantastical city caught his eye. The artwork reminded him of the stories he used to tell Kim during her treatments, Tales of courage and perseverance dressed up as adventures. A quote from Ruth's sister stood out. She spent her life creating worlds where differences are celebrated, only to have her own fairy tale shattered by someone who couldn't see past her wheelchair. The words hit close to home. Keanu thought about his own sister's strength, how she had faced each challenge with grace, while never letting illness define her entire existence. He found himself looking up more of Ruth's work, discovering her blog where she shared insights about her creative process. Her latest post, dated just before the wedding, talked about designing inclusive characters and the importance of seeing yourself in stories. The contrast between her professional confidence and personal heartbreak struck a chord. Without really planning to, Keanu found himself reaching out to his team. A few quick calls confirmed what he suspected. Ruth's story had resonated with many people, but most of the attention focused on the scandal rather than her artistry or resilience. His publicist advised against getting involved, warning about the media circus that might ensue. But Keanu remembered something his sister had told him during her hardest days. Sometimes the most important acts of kindness are the ones that seem impractical to others. Making his decision, he asked his assistant to reach out to Ruth's publisher, not as a celebrity offering charity, but as someone who understood the impact of art in healing. He had an idea forming, not about fixing everything, but about showing Ruth that her story wasn't over just because one chapter had ended badly. In his hotel room, Keanu looked again at Ruth's artwork, at the world she created where limitations became launching points for extraordinary adventures. He knew from experience that sometimes the deepest connections come from shared understanding of life's unexpected turns. Ruth sat at her drafting table, afternoon sunlight streaming through her apartment windows, attempting to focus on a new character design. Her tablet displayed multiple abandoned sketches, none capturing the spirit she once brought so easily to her work. The sound of the doorbell startled her from her frustrated reverie. Emily had finally returned to her own apartment 2 days ago, and Ruth wasn't expecting visitors. Through the security camera feed on her phone, she saw a man in a simple black jacket, baseball cap pulled low over his face. Her first thought was another reporter trying to get her story. She almost didn't answer, but something in his posture seemed different from the usual aggressive media presence. Ruth maneuvered her wheelchair to the door, opening it just enough to speak through the gap. The man looked up, removing his cap, and Ruth's breath caught in her throat. She had drawn his face countless times during hospital stays, but nothing had prepared her for Keanu Reeves standing at her door, holding a worn sketchbook and wearing a gentle expression that matched every story she'd ever heard about his kindness. For a moment, neither spoke, but Ruth's mind raced through possibilities. She must be hallucinating, or maybe the stress had finally broken her grip on reality. Keanu broke the silence first, his voice warm and surprisingly hesitant. He introduced himself, though they both knew it wasn't necessary, and asked if he could come in to talk about art and stories. Ruth's apartment, still showing signs of canceled wedding preparations despite Emily's best efforts, suddenly felt surreal as Keanu Reeves settled onto her couch. He handled her collection of art books with genuine interest, pausing over a well-worn volume of concept art from his own films. The conversation started tentatively, with Keanu sharing his sister Kim's story of battling leukemia. He spoke of hospital rooms transformed by imagination, of how art became a bridge between pain and hope. As he talked, he opened the sketchbook he'd brought, filled with Kim's drawings and his own amateur attempts to create alongside her during treatments. Ruth found herself rolling closer, professional artist eye caught by the raw emotion in the sketches. Without thinking, she began pointing out details, how certain lines captured feelings words couldn't express, how color choices revealed hidden strength. Keanu listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he understood art as more than just pretty pictures. The afternoon light shifted to evening as they shared stories. Ruth revealed how his films had inspired her hospital room artwork, not just for their action, but for their underlying messages about resilience. She showed him her earliest sketches of her wheelchair detective character, admitting how personal that story felt. Keanu's eyes lit up at her portfolio, particularly the unfinished pieces from before the wedding. He noted how her style had evolved, showing strength even in moments of vulnerability. When he reached the most recent attempts, the scattered, uncertain sketches, he paused thoughtfully. Their discussion deepened as they explored the intersection of art and adversity. Keanu spoke about watching his sister face prejudice during her illness, how people's attitudes changed when they saw her as a patient first and a person second. Ruth shared her experiences in the publishing world, where some still questioned whether children would relate to disabled characters. As night fell outside her windows, Ruth realized she had spent hours talking freely about things she usually kept guarded. There was something about Keanu's presence that made vulnerability feel safe. He listened without judgment, shared without pity, and saw her work first, her wheelchair second. Exactly the opposite of how James had ultimately seen her. Before leaving, Keanu asked to take one of her unfinished sketches, the one showing a woman surrounded by broken pieces, creating something new. His genuine appreciation for its meaning touched something deep in Ruth's artistic soul. He promised to return it with his sister's thoughts, suggesting that perhaps their shared experiences with art and healing could lead to something meaningful. Standing in her doorway, Keanu turned back with one last observation. He noted that her butterfly-decorated wheelchair looked like something from one of her illustrations, not an object of limitation, but a detail in a larger story still being written. The weeks following Keanu's visit brought gradual but profound changes to Ruth's life. Her drafting table, once a reminder of creative paralysis, became active again with fresh energy and purpose. The sketchbook he had admired now filled with new characters and scenes, each drawing stronger than the last, as if his recognition of her talent had reignited something essential within her. Keanu kept his promise, returning with not only her sketch but also an unexpected proposition. His sister Kim had reviewed Ruth's portfolio and suggested a collaboration, an art exhibition focusing on stories of transformation and resilience. The theme would weave together Ruth's illustrations with photographs and artwork from others who had faced similar challenges, creating a narrative about human strength and connection. The local gallery that had previously offered to host her work eagerly embraced the expanded concept. Ruth found herself immersed in planning meetings, her artistic vision expanding beyond the confines of children's book illustrations. She created new pieces specifically for the exhibition, including a central series that traced her journey from the wedding day through her healing process. Working alongside Keanu and Kim brought unexpected moments of joy. Kim's perspective as someone who had faced serious illness added depth to their artistic discussions. The three of them spent hours in Ruth's studio, surrounded by sketches and possibility. Keanu often brought coffee and sat quietly, offering observations that showed he understood both the technical and emotional aspects of her work. Ruth's publisher, initially concerned about missed deadlines, became excited about her evolving style. Her wheelchair detective character gained new depth, solving mysteries that went beyond simple cases to explore themes of identity and acceptance. Fan mail increased as word of the upcoming exhibition spread, with readers sharing how her work had impacted their own journeys. Media attention shifted from focusing on her wedding day tragedy to highlighting her artistic achievements. A prominent art magazine ran a feature on her innovative approach to inclusive storytelling. When reporters asked about Keanu's involvement, she spoke about their shared understanding of art as a healing force, careful to emphasize that their connection was built on mutual respect rather than celebrity charity. The exhibition preparation demanded long hours and intense focus. Ruth discovered muscles she didn't know her art had, pushing beyond comfortable techniques to explore new methods of expression. She incorporated elements from her wedding day into her work, the crystal butterflies that had adorned her wheelchair becoming a recurring motif, transformed from symbols of failed dreams into emblems of unexpected flight. Keanu's presence remained constant but unobtrusive. He attended planning meetings when his schedule allowed, often arriving with sketches from Kim or ideas for the exhibition layout. His genuine enthusiasm for the project attracted attention from unexpected quarters. A children's hospital reached out about featuring some of her work in their long-term care ward, recognizing how her stories could bring hope to young patients. As the exhibition opening approached, Ruth found herself working on a special piece, a large-scale illustration incorporating elements from all her previous work. The wheelchair detective appeared alongside new characters, each representing different aspects of strength and vulnerability. In the center, barely noticeable unless you knew to look, was a small figure wearing a black coat, offering a sketchbook to someone in need. The transformation wasn't just professional. Ruth's apartment slowly shed its wedding remnants, replaced by art supplies and exhibition plans. Emily noticed her sister, laughing more freely, speaking about the future with renewed confidence. The viral post about her wedding day was buried under news about her upcoming exhibition, proving that life's worst moments don't have to define its story. One evening, as Ruth worked late in her studio, she realized something profound. The pain of James's rejection hadn't disappeared, but it had changed shape. Like the butterflies in her artwork, it had undergone a metamorphosis, becoming part of a larger narrative about growth and self-discovery. Her wheelchair, once seen by others as a limitation, had become just another tool in her artistic journey, as natural as her stylus and tablet. The exhibition project attracted artists from across the country who wanted to contribute their stories of transformation. Ruth found herself at the center of a growing community, connected not by disability or hardship, but by the universal experience of rewriting one's story after life takes an unexpected turn. In curating their work alongside her own, she discovered new dimensions to her artistic voice, learning to speak not just for herself, but for a chorus of resilient spirits. The night of the exhibition opening transformed the gallery into a celebration of resilience. Soft lighting illuminated Ruth's artwork, creating an atmosphere that invited visitors to step into the world she had created. Her wheelchair detective series took center stage, alongside the new pieces that chronicled her journey of transformation. The crystal butterflies from her wedding chair, now incorporated into her art, caught the light and scattered rainbow reflections across the walls. Ruth positioned herself near the entrance, greeting guests in a midnight blue dress that complemented her rebuilt confidence. The chair beneath her sparkled with new decorations, silver stars replacing the wedding butterflies, symbolizing not just survival but evolution. Her hands, steady now with renewed purpose, held a portfolio containing her latest work. Keanu arrived quietly, slipping into a side door with his sister Kim. They moved through the gallery like any other guests, taking time to study each piece and engage with other visitors about the stories behind the artwork. Kim's presence added another layer of authenticity to the evening, her own experiences with illness and recovery resonating with many guests who had similar stories to share. The exhibition had drawn an unexpected crowd. Art critics mingled with families whose children knew Ruth's books by heart. Young readers in wheelchairs approached her with dog-eared copies of her detective series, sharing how her characters had helped them feel seen. Medical professionals from the Children's Hospital discussed the healing power of art, making plans to incorporate her work into their therapeutic programs. Halfway through the evening, Ruth noticed a familiar figure hovering near the back of the gallery. James stood awkwardly by her series of transformation pieces, his expression a mixture of regret and recognition. Their eyes met briefly across the room. A moment that might once have shattered her now passed with surprising gentleness. Ruth felt no need to speak with him. Her artwork said everything necessary about her journey from that day at the altar to this moment of triumph. Keanu took the stage briefly, not as a celebrity, but as a fellow artist and friend. He spoke about the power of stories to heal and connect, about how Ruth's work reached beyond disability to touch universal human experiences of challenge and growth. His words, genuine and understated, shifted attention back to the art itself, exactly as Ruth had wanted. The evening's highlight came when Ruth unveiled her final piece, the large-scale illustration she had been working on throughout the exhibition preparation. In it, a diverse group of characters emerged from various challenges, each contributing to a larger tapestry of human resilience. The wheelchair detective solved mysteries alongside dancers, artists, and dreamers of all abilities. Hidden within the intricate details, careful observers might notice a small tribute, a figure in a black coat sharing a sketchbook with someone in need. As the night drew to a close, Ruth found herself surrounded by a different kind of family than the one she had imagined on her wedding day. Artists whose work complemented her own, readers whose lives she had touched, and friends who had supported her transformation gathered around, sharing stories and planning future collaborations. Kim discussed possibilities for art therapy programs, while Keanu quietly observed the impact of their shared vision. The exhibition marked not an ending, but a beginning that Ruth's publisher had approved a new series featuring diverse characters facing various challenges, with the wheelchair detective now part of a larger ensemble. The children's hospital installation was scheduled for the following month. Most importantly, Ruth had rediscovered her voice, not just as an artist who happened to use a wheelchair, but as a storyteller who understood that every life's unexpected turns could become part of a larger, more beautiful narrative. The final guest departed, leaving Ruth alone with her artwork. She wheeled through the gallery, taking in each piece one last time. The crystal butterflies caught the dimming light, their rainbow reflections dancing across her path. In their sparkle, she saw not the remnants of a broken dream, but the shimmer of something far more precious. The discovery that sometimes life's most painful moments can lead to its most meaningful transformations.